Hi, this is Maintenance Day, and per our tradition, we're gonna make another tier list, this time about the story, because we're going to Dawntrail soon, and we're ending a 10-year saga, so it's about time that we rate every single story there has been. What we're gonna talk about is just the main story quest, so we're not gonna talk about the Alliance raid stuff. Before we start, I kinda wanna talk about how we're gonna rate each story arcs. So usually when people try to rate this stuff, they tend to lump everything together, but they have to know that in every fiction, there are a lot of stuff that goes into it. The three main pillars of the story is, of course, the world building, so you can feel how the world is alive even before you are there. And the plot, of course, this follows your main character and the story that unfolds. And then the characters, of course, we need to have a good character for a good story. And lastly, I think I need to add one more outside of the three main pillar, which is delivery, because you can have all of these good, but you can get a very bad delivery and everything went to chaos. Without any further ado, let's start. This is Aylaveen, and here's my tier list for every Final Fantasy XIV story before Dawntrail. So, the first one, A Realm Reborn. People are hating so much on A Realm Reborn, and they think everything about Realm Reborn is bad. I don't think it was all that bad, because personally, I think the world building is pretty good. Like, I remember this one scene where they show Agrias being destroyed by Midgardsormr, and actually the remains of that is still there in Mordona till this day. And they also really depict very well on the aftermath of Battle of Cardinal and how Dalamut actually destroys everything from 1.0. And to be honest, the delivery was not very good, but that was understandable. UGP is trying to build a new MMO from the ground up, but of course the plot is not strong, like it's very generic. Of course there are some good plot twists, like I really like when Livia actually invades Waking Sands. I think that was a good plot twist in a sense, especially when Livia kicks that cabbage. I was really excited when we know that Thancred was actually La Habrea, but that was just like for a glimpse of a moment, because immediately after that they revealed that Asians actually doesn't have a physical body and can take over anyone's body. Like, why would they do that? I think Thancred being La Habrea is much cooler of a plot. Realm Reborn's pretty bad in terms of everything other than the world building itself. So I'm gonna put it on... Let's just start at D. Next up is the Post-ARR stuff. So here's my thought. People actually hating on Post-ARR so much that I actually kind of disagree. I kind of agree on the delivery. The delivery success, really. But I think the plot was really good, especially about the Crystal Braves and how Alvinaut's naivety actually shows, because he thinks he's this one hero that could save everything, and he makes this alliance that covers the whole Eorzea, and then it blew up in his face and all of his friends, and he actually blames himself for it. Like, he got really depressed. I agree, there are some unnecessary stuff. Well, I think Nebrialis and Monbrida is an interesting character, but they add absolutely nothing to the main plot, so that was kind of a shame. But other than that, I genuinely think the plot was pretty decent. For that, I think I'm gonna put it on C, just because I especially like Ilbert, which was introduced here. I also kinda interested in Teleji Adeleji's motive. I think they write it really well on how Teleji Adeleji wants to move refugees to the Cardinal, and then he wants to take over Cardinal because he might have a chance on getting Omega's power that was buried underneath Cardinal. I agree that the delivery was really poor. There are so many quests that was unnecessary. We have Heavensward. Okay, this is one of people's favorite actually. I personally think Heavensward is really good. Like, the plot is very solid. There are so many twists that we don't expect, like how the Dravanians are actually not in fault and in starting Dragonsong's War, and it's actually not Nidhogg. It's actually the Alizens that kill Ratatosk and enrage Nidhogg. Some of the twists that I really like also was the fact that it was not Nidhogg's eye when Estinian actually killed him. That was a really good twist too, and we saw a lot of character development. I really like how Alfinaud actually developed as a man here, and I also like the Thordan character and their knights. I think they're interesting characters. I really like Hilda. Hilda's character design I really like, but I genuinely think Hilda adds absolutely nothing to the story. Also, I really don't like Igeorm. Personally, I think if Igeorm was not there, with only La Habrea, I think it's much more impactful before we went into Torrent and beating La Habrea's ass. Because La Habrea was the main villain in Realm Reborn. Him coming back in Heavensward kinda makes sense. But Igeorm just doesn't add anything, in my opinion. So I don't really like Igeorm. We all can agree about the plot with one of the most iconic deaths in the entire series. Of course, Horchefan's death, the line, which is why I thought the delivery was really good. A smile better suits a hero. That was a really good line. Also, I think the Izel's death was also pretty cool. Even though people don't appreciate it as much as Horchefan's, I still think Izel's death is actually pretty pivotal to the story. So that's why I'm putting Heavensward straight at A. Okay, so we're moving on to Post-Heavensward. In my opinion, Post-Heavensward is one of the best off-patch expansion story that has ever been told. And let me tell you why. Because at the end of Heavensward, right, Nidhogg actually takes over Estinian's body, and it gives you a sense that the war is not over. Aymeric actually tried to make a peace treaty with one of the dragon's faction, Hraesvelgur's side, but you can actually see how people in Ishgard retaliate to that. The fact that it happens, we actually got poisoned by a barkeep whose husband actually died from the Dravanian war, and then we also saw how people disagree on Aymeric being the leader. There was this one scene where a priest actually tried to push off a child of a tower, which was saved by Fedofnir, and I think that was also really cool. And the plot twists are somewhat decent, but the delivery was impeccable, I think. The final Nidhogg fight was really cool, and we saw how they tried to argue with Hraesvelgur and try to get him into battle. And of course, the second half was also very good. I think the bridging from Heavensward to Stormblood is one of the best because of the second half portion of the Post-Heavensward patch, which is the Griffin issue. This is why I think Ilbert is one of the best villain in Final Fantasy XIV, because as an Alamigan, he actually have an ambition to save his homeland Alamigo, but he knows that Eorzean Alliance is not gonna step any foot towards Alamigo because it was too risky, too time consuming, and there will be sacrifices made, and it's not gonna be small. What he did was he forced the Eorzean Alliance to go into war to the Empire and actually try to take over Alamigo. The way he does it was also very smart, in my opinion, by using the Crystal Braves in the Eorzean Alliance uniform and starting a war with the Garlean Empire. The ending was really cool, how he actually sacrificed a lot of people and himself to summon Shinryu. And of course, the aftermath of the Shinryu summon, which is Papalimo's death, was also amazing. The scene was cool. Even the delivery on the Shinryu battle with Omega was also really cool. I actually think this is slightly better than Heavensward, just because on how it actually feels really alive. Everything and every aspect in this story you can actually sympathize with. So for that, I gotta put it slightly above Heavensward. While it is true that the Stormblood's plot is pretty bad and there are so many unnecessary prolonged storylines that they don't need, with a very short and simple premise, but I think the world building is actually pretty good. One of my favorite thing about Stormblood is how they actually put together a sense of war, as Jirabania and Othard are the two places that was under the occupation of the Garlean Empire, and it really feels that way. I think the world building in Stormblood was really good. It's just there are so many unnecessary things in the plot that actually ruins the story. One of my favorite world building aspect of the Stormblood is the fact that early on when they introduced Xenos, they actually play this one Garlean anthem. And then when I actually finished Stormblood, the same song actually plays again. But it turns out that that song was actually the Aylaveen national anthem. I thought at that time, wow, that is some colonialism shit that I never thought would be possible. That was really cool. In order to crush your enemy's spirits, you actually change their national anthem into yours. Like, that was so fucked up. Of course, the ending of Stormblood actually was pretty good, I think, where Xenos actually takes his own life. But other than that, I think there's just too much stalling. So I'm gonna put it on B. Because the delivery was not as bad as Post-ARR, and the world building is much better, but the plot was really weak. Okay, so with the Post-Stormblood, I actually think the first half was really boring because there's no stakes on it. Like, we talk about Yotsuyu and Gosetsu, like, I really like their dynamic, but there's no stakes there. But here's the thing, there's a lot of character that doesn't shine in Stormblood that actually shines post-Stormblood. For example, Yotsuyu, with her losing her memory and then finding herself. Also Fordola, I think Fordola is a really interesting character. How she actually does not want to betray Alamigo, but the people of Alamigo actually force her to do it in a way. They bully her. You can kind of sympathize with Fordola. Well, other than Fordola, I think there's also Gaius, where we actually saw him without the mask, and then he actually shows how his character developed, and he's trying to hunt the Asians because of the ARR events. Those stuff should have been put in Stormblood, but they focus a bit too much on the world building. But the plot in Post-Stormblood is rather weak, and I think the bridging from Stormblood to Shadowbringers is a bit rough. I don't really like the fact that every Scions suddenly went into coma, like out of nowhere. Of course, we know that after Shadowbringers, but at the time, when I went through this patch, that feels really off and really weird. I think I'm gonna put it on C. Okay, we're moving on to Shadowbringers. Before we even talk about it, we just gotta put it on S. We all know Emet-Selch is the best villain of all time. Like, his character, the background, like why he actually endured everything in order to save his friends. It was just way too insane. Like, the delivery was on point. Have you ever felt so much emotion when you went into a zone? Like, I haven't played so many MMOs and I never felt so emotional when I went into the Imorat in Tempest. And that shit was crazy. I nearly cried. And I even felt very uneasy when I entered Yulmore. That was also insane. Like, the world building was just impeccable. How they show the social gap in Yulmore and how they show the hardships. The plot was insane. Like, the Teslin scene was impeccable. The Minfilia one was also sad. I think even the Thancred's monologue before Minfilia's death was also really cool. Of course, the ending. Holy shit.
Remember us. Remember that we once lived.
Man, that was insane. Yeah, everything about Shadowbringer is just perfect, man. I don't know, I can't even really talk about it. It is the best expansion story-wise in Final Fantasy XIV. It's not even a close debate. Even the reveal of Grahatia kind of makes me tear up a bit. Everything, I could talk on and on about Shadowbringers and how good it is, but I think this video will be way too long. So we gotta move on to the next one. I think this is also very interesting. In a sense, we talk about Elidibus much more. Personally, I really like Elidibus as a character. but there are some places in the story where it's not as good as Shadowbringers, but the delivery is still impeccable in my opinion. For example, as a simple premise as saying goodbyes, there's this one scene with Seto. I was actually tearing up. The first time I saw that cutscene, like, holy shit, this hits hard. From how he words stuff and how the song played, the delivery was just flawless. Like, it's such a simple premise with a perfect delivery. You see, you don't really need the complex stuff to make a good story. Just the delivery itself can make people cry. We also hear a lot about Artbird and how he was falsely accused and clearing his name up. The bridging to Endwalker is pretty okay-ish. The premise was actually pretty simple in this Post-Shadowbringers because it was trying to get Scions back into the source from the first. And then we continued the war for a bit. Actually, we saw Tiamat, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we actually saw Tiamat because Van Daniel was gonna summon Lunar Bahamut. Okay, that was pretty interesting. So I think the plot was really solid too in this one. Well, I especially like the Seed of Sacrifice trial. That was one of my favorite trial. The scene where Ametsalk actually summons us back and then gives the signature Ametsalk wave. That was really cool. I love that. I love that a lot. So in that sense, I gotta put this one actually slightly above Heavensward 2. Like, it's still better than Heavensward. But it's not, I personally think it's still not as good as Post-Heavensward, but it's still very good because Post-Heavensward still have a lot of stakes on it. Like, this one actually talks more about you getting back to the source and Elidibus being a nuisance in a very classy way. I know people have been telling the fact that Endwalker is not as good as Shadowbringers, which is true, but you cannot ignore the fact that this is still one of the best expansion story-wise. When I played Endwalker, the moment that we get to fight Zodiark very early on to the expansion, I thought, wow, this was really cool. I wonder who we actually fight at the end, because technically Zodiark was supposed to be our last boss, right? But the fact that we know that this is too early for the last boss actually makes me wonder and makes me want to play the game even more. And I think that was a good plot twist. Their delivery was also very, very good. Like the scene with Hydaelyn's death, wow, that almost got me cry. I think Flow is one of the best song ever written for Final Fantasy XIV, and that scene where Hydaelyn talks to us and this song was playing, it really feels like your mother is talking to you and she's dying soon, like it's her last words. That was such a good scene. Of course, there are some unnecessary stuff. I think the Loporit stuff is a bit... I know I will get a lot of hate for this because Loporits are cute, yeah, and all, but yeah, I think it was a bit much for me. Well, the world building is okay-ish. I really like the final days, how the concept goes into. The thing that I don't like about the plot twist was the fact that our last boss is pulled out of a thin air. Don't get me wrong, I really like Metaion as a character, but I just don't like the fact that it was our last boss. Cause I really like the nihility concept of the whole thing, the Endwalker story concept. Like they talk about nihilism a lot, like how Metaion actually connects with her sister and saw that the end of every living thing is just dying. That concept to me was really cool. And then how even the plot Vandaniel turns out to be Hermes, turns out to be Amon. The monologue at Itiascope, I think, was one of the best monologue ever written. Yeah, I think the delivery was really good in this story. It's just that I don't really like the plot in some parts, but I still think this is one of the best expansion story-wise that we have ever gotten. Okay, so I might get a hate for this, but I think this is tough. I'm gonna put it here. I still think this is slightly better than Heavensward. In a sense that Heavensward, which is understandable, Heavensward delivery is not as good as Endwalker. Let me just say that. So that's why I have to put Endwalker slightly higher than Heavensward. But both are still very good story-wise. Okay, next we move on to Post-Endwalker. Okay, I get the fact that it's kinda hard to make a story when the saga is ending. It's a bit tricky, but I think they did a pretty good job on this one. Of course, the plot is not as strong. I really like the premise on how we try to help Vertra finding his sister. I think when we went into the Void was not very eventful, because personally I think, and I will get a lot of hate for this, Zero was not a really interesting character for me. Like, the premise was cool, like she is the Void that made pact with Xenos, but other than that, she's just this empty glass that needs to be filled, and that was kinda generic at this point. I'm not a big fan of that, but I think the most interesting part of the Darkthorn was Golbez, and how he was actually not Golbez. It's actually Durante, and the old Golbez was a real hero. Yeah, I kinda have a mixed feeling about the characters, but it's pretty okay. The plot itself was pretty straightforward because we tried to find her and then bring her back. The character was not very good, but there are some good characters, but not all. The delivery was okay. I gotta put this one on, let's see, slightly above the Post-Stormblood, because there are some unnecessary parts from this storyline. Like, I honestly don't think that Zeromus was necessary. Like, that was just trying to extend the story a bit. Now we take a look again. I would probably put... Well, if this was the case, I think I gotta put Realm Reborn down a bit and then put this one down. But yeah, I still put most of it on A because, well, I really like Final Fantasy XIV, and I think the story is one of the strongest selling point, and I think that stays true by seeing this tier list. Tier list is always a subjective thing. Of course, you will disagree on some parts, let me know. Yeah, so that's about it, and I think we just have one more day till Dawntrail, and overall I was really satisfied with the 10-year saga. I hope we can see each other in the next video. See ya!